Army veteran right here. Yeah, I'm gangster granny here. I was in the Army in the 70s and I started Comic Spot so that I, an Army veteran, can vet out veterans of comedy like Sarah today. She's over there in the other square. Sarah, and it say your last, I'm going to go with Tolemache.
It's Tolemash.
Tolemache. I would have had it totally wrong. Thank you for correcting me. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'm trying to hit buttons here and it's not working. Okay, Sarah Tollemache. Tolemache?
Yes, Tolemash.
Tolemache is here today so that we can celebrate her comedy career. Oh my gosh, wait until you hear her intro that she sent to me, and I quote, as soon as I find it. She's done everything, you guys. Oh my gosh, this is the dream. She's living the comedy dream. Wait until you hear this. Sarah Tollemache is a stand-up comedian, writer, and podcast host. She has been featured on, hold up, I got to get this to work, Comedy Central, as well as NBC's Last Comic Standing. You know, you've heard of it. In 2017, she appeared on the Stephen Colbert show. Tolemache followed that up with another late night appearance on The Late Show with James Corden. Who doesn't want to be on that one, you guys? She has also appeared on Comedy Central's Roast Battle and Gotham Comedy Live. When she's not touring comedy clubs around the country, Sarah can be seen regularly at the Comedy Cellar and New York Comedy Club in New York City. Sarah is also the co-host of a popular weekly podcast called Badge, Badge. Oh my gosh, she is doing comedy at the best of the best places, you guys. She's living the freaking comedy dream. Let's get to know her and love her and support her. You know you want to meet her. Here she is, live-ish. Sarah Tollemache. Hi.
Hi, Linda. Thanks for my bio.
Tolemache.
Yeah.
I'll get it sooner or later. They should just do a bunch of outtakes of all my mispronunciations. Tolemache.
Well, there's a lot of weird names in stand-up, so I feel like, I don't know, when you host, you're just stressed out because you're like, oh my God, I don't want to ruin these people's names.
Thank you. And now coming to the stage is our next comic. Let's hear it with a round of applause. Oh my gosh, yes. And then don't even get me started on the stage names that are different than their Facebook names.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of everybody. I find that if like, because I'm online all the time, it's easier to keep, like if I see you online, I'll remember you a lot easier than I'll see you in the real world.
Thank you. And then Instagram. What is with people and their Instagram handles? Like Sally the Baker, and they're like, you're a comic. You're not, don't confuse me. I don't care.
I know my friend was like, what is all these comics with nutrition advice these days instead of doing jokes? I'm like, I know, we're all trying to find our niche or whatever, however you say it.
Yes. What does Tolemache mean?
That's not very exciting. My dad told me it meant knapsack.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Knapsack. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds very German or Dutch or Swiss or Austrian.
It's a French origin. It dates back from Normandy, France, and then it's when they raided Scotland. So my background is Scottish, but I have a French influenced last name.
I love that. Wow. My mom's family on my mom's dad's side is Dreyfus, like Richard and Julia Louis.
Yeah.
And we all come from the same city in France. But I haven't, gotten them to reply to any of my numerous emails that I want to go to the family picnic.
Yeah, I'll every now and then I'll get somebody on my family tree that'll reach out, and I'm like, I don't know what side of the family you're on, or I'll get a weird fact about our name, and I'll have no idea about it.
Yes, yeah. I went and did a bunch of ancestry work because my parents survived the Holocaust.
Oh,
And
wow.
Sarah, I found a living relative that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know she was ever born. And she fled on the last boat out of Germany to Argentina, and she's still alive. And she's like my grandfather's younger sister, whatever. I didn't even know she existed.
That's crazy. I love stuff like that. I mean, I don't like the, under the situation that it was, but when you find out where all your family went to and why, and it's just like, it's so interesting to find out everyone's background.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, do you have a lot of Tolemash relatives in the United States?
Not really. I think I'm actually one of the only Tolemash we have, or my family is the only Tolemash in the US, but there's a derivative, anyone with the last name that has Talmadge, Talmadge, is from the same family tree. And I think there are more of those here than there are in other areas. We're big in, there's a lot in New Zealand. We have a family place in England. And then Australia, there's a lot of Tolemashes there, but not that many over here in the US.
Wow. Well, let's get on back to your life. Aside from your heritage, you're a funny comedian. You've made it in the biz. You're in the best clubs in New York City. You're in the ones everyone strives to get into. You've been on the top shows in America. Holy, and you've been on that Last Comic Standing, right?
Yeah, I did that. It was very in the beginning and I was fairly new. And so I always made it to the night round, but I never made it past that. But I got a brief minute on that show.
What was that like? And then I want to go back into your childhood. What was that like?
Those shows are always nerve-wracking because when you audition for judges that have been there for all day. They're tired, they're annoyed, they've seen a lot of stand-up, a lot of bad and some good. And then when you go up there, you feel that energy, but you have to ignore that. And then you're also performing, you're not performing for an audience, you're performing for 3 people. So you have to pretend that you're doing well.
Wow, that's good
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah, it's just stressful because you're just like, I don't, and it's not an ideal show. But then once you make it to the night round where it's a full audience, that crowd is so hot that you really can't do wrong for it.
Yes, yes. I saw Last Comic Standing the other night. No, I guess it was America's Got Talent. There's a gentleman, Marty Ross, that's in it, and he started off, his first couple jokes didn't land, and then like a true professional, he brought the big audience back on board. He just didn't let it sway him. But then another episode, there was a lady about my age up there, and she let it bother her, and she actually had a lot of trouble getting back on track, and that was too bad. But Marty
Oh
showed
yeah.
how how you can get the audience back even if your first couple jokes don't eat. People will be looking at each other like, why is that guy up there? And then he showed them.
Yeah, that one's weird. I did that one right when pandemic hit, when Tom Hanks, and I had the same experience. But just because I've done those shows for a while, you just know that it's fine if the first one hits because you're actually the first comic of the day or in that show, and they're not used to it and they don't really know what's happening because they're used to seeing somebody like swallowing fire or making stuff disappear, and then you go on and you're just telling stories. So at first they're not registering what's going on. So you have to ignore that response and act like you're doing well.
Wow, I love that. Talk to me about getting on Stephen Colbert and on James Corden. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Well, I had always wanted, you always want to do a late night, and I was trying to do Letterman for a while, and I got to it, but then as everything in show business happened, usually the guy that books it or produces it, they end up going to another show, so you kind of have to start all over. And then so I kind of put it on the shelf for a while, and then the booker for Colbert at the time, she followed me on Twitter, and I did a tweet and I think it did well, and she responded, reached out to me, and she's like, hey, if you're ever interested in doing Stephen Colbert, send me a tape. So I sent her a tape, and then the response on that one was, do you have anything else? Where you're like, that's never what you want to hear. So then I was like, well, why don't I write down every clean bit that I have, and then you choose what you like? Because it's such a guessing game for bookers. You don't know what jokes they're going to respond to. And so when you tape, you're like, I don't know if they're going to like this stuff, even though it does well in the tape, or it might not work for their show setting. So I felt like just saying, why don't I write every joke that I have that's clean, and you choose what you like, and then we can build a set from there. And then that made it a lot easier, because once she chose the jokes that she liked or thought that would work for Colbert, then I was able to get a tape from that. And then I booked a showcase show where she was seeing a bunch of comics, and I happened to do really well that night. I mean, it's really hard to get a good tape.
Yes.
Like, to get 5 minutes on tape, it's so hard because sometimes the crowd's not great. The way you have it set up is not great. Somebody spills a drink, somebody knocks your camera. It's just really hard to get a good tape. And then you're trying to guess what jokes that booker wants to hear from you. So it's just, some of it is luck, but it's also like luck meets preparation. And so I happened to hit that night on the showcase show, and then from there it was pretty easy. And then I got my date, and then it was nerve-wracking because it's your first late night. And then it went really well, and then it made me worried because they taped it, but because that night ran long or something, they had to take my section and then they edit it a week later. So you still get worried that they're not going to put it on air. And so that was stressful. And then they put it on, and then that was exciting. That was like the first one done, but I couldn't even watch myself. So I didn't even really, I had to watch from the other room when it aired. And then once that was done, I felt like it was easier your foot's in the door. And then I got one, I think it was 2 years later when the next one came along for James Corden. And that was an easier experience.
Was it? What's it like to be around Colbert and James Corden?
Well, Colbert's different. Like, I never met him. Like, he doesn't come and introduce himself. And so you do your set, and then I was one of the last few comics that got to do it on the night that he was there. Now he just does a showcase show and they edit you, and then they fit you later down. So you could do it, and then you don't show up till 6 months later. And so that's kind of stressful. Where James Corden, you do it, you get your own dressing room, and then he comes in and he introduces himself, and then afterwards you finish your set, and then he comes on stage, and then you get to banter a little bit. And he was very supportive, where like I met Colbert, like when he came over to reach to like shake your hand, then there's a stage producer that grabs you by the shoulder and whisks you away. So you don't even have a moment. So you're just like, so I think I preferred the James Corden one because it felt more special.
Yes, that's the feeling I get from watching Colbert and Corden. That doesn't surprise me. I'm not making a negative judgment. I'm just saying I kind of predicted that response from you, but that would be accurate from what I see.
Yeah, it was just I felt like Corden was more into, like, he was rooting for you, where the other show was just very business as norm. You do your thing and then you go. So it was just like a more fun experience and a lighter, like for the backstage of Corden, everyone's hanging out. So it feels like a cocktail hour before you do your set. So it kind of drops your guard down a little bit. So I felt like I had more fun on Corden. And I think also because that one was my second one, and I realized like it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Even if I bomb, it'll be fine.
Totally. So you get to perform at some of the best clubs in New York City. And that must feel so good because, in New York City, there must be 2,000, 2,500 comics scratching to get into the places that you're vetted into.
Oh yeah, there's so many comics. There's people that you are friends with that you're like, I only run into you maybe once a year, and we're even at the same clubs. We're just like two ships in the night. There's so
Yeah.
many of us. And then you go to another club and it's a whole different other group of comics. Like
Yeah.
each club has kind of their own culture.
That's so true. So what's the roast battles? Like I could not do that unless somebody just really pissed me off 5 minutes before. I'm all about they need to have a roast where you can like do where you can put people up on a pedestal. I'd be good at that, but I can't do a roast, but I sure love
Yeah.
to laugh at
Oh, well, I love watching roast. I feel like it's kind of like an art form where you get to see joke telling. It's also, I feel like you get to say your naughtier jokes and it's accepted because both parties have agreed to the conditions.
Yes.
Um, so I enjoy it. It seems to be a little darker, naughtier. So it's like kind of pushing the envelope a little bit, which is always fun to watch. Um, but I don't usually I always enjoy roasts. I enjoy watching them, but I never participated in them because it's a nerve-wracking ordeal because a lot of the times those jokes are jokes that you've never workshopped before. You're doing it for the first time. You also can't trip up on your words because it ruins the edge to it a little bit. So if you don't get to work out your joke and you trip up on it, like you've deflated your sting quite a bit, and so you already know that you're like, well, that didn't work out as soon as you trip up on your words. um I also for I I did roast. I only roasted once, and I only did it because they paid me. That's the only way that I'll roast. And it was with my husband. And so that was quite fun. And I actually think you should roast people that you adore and love because I think that it makes it easier and you know the boundaries, um and you both sign up for it because I think sometimes people end up roasting people that have no idea any information about them, so that makes it hard to dig up some fun stuff to talk about on stage. And Joe and we had talked about all the stuff that we were comfortable with, that we thought that the audience um, would think it's funny that we were able to make fun of each other for. So that was a very fun experience.
Oh my gosh. So what was one thing he said about you and one thing you said about him that you remember going over really well?
Well, I always joke with Joe, and I'm aware, and I don't care anymore, is that I realize a lot of opportunities that I've gotten is because Joe has helped me. And I know you're not supposed to say that, but also in stand up and in show business, it's full of nepotism. So who cares? And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get to stay there and prove yourself. So I don't think it matters. Like, you never get, I feel like nothing's given to you fairly anyway. It's always, no one's like, congratulations, you made it to the next level. It's like a friend that's like, hey, would you be interested doing this? And you're like, okay. That's how most things happen in stand up. So I
Yeah.
was comfortable with him making jokes about riding his coattails. And I think it was on people's minds. So it was kind of something that they felt good about laughing about. And so I had no problem with him doing that. And then he talked openly about having herpes. So we thought it was funny to mention that as in joke form. So yeah, those were some subjects that we were fine talking about.
That's so cool. I love that. I love how, like it's especially fun when it's a couple like that. And then
Yeah, I think
get in
people
on
want to see you. Yeah, they want to see they know people fight, and they know they want to see two people that are in a relationship fight openly. I mean, how much do you love in the city when you see a couple fighting on the train? I always want to know what they're talking about.
Me too. I'm always looking like when people, even when there's tweakers out on Vegas Boulevard that are yelling at each other, I always look for, yeah, you know what? I think every single tweaker that's in an argument with their partner, they're all having the exact same conversation.
Yeah, they're not being seen.
It's never anything they think it's so unique. And I just heard it 5 minutes on Charleston Boulevard. Same thing.
Yeah, it's universal. I always just want to know, I just want to hear what the argument is so I can determine whose side I'm on.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, do not let me get around anybody where the man is physically taking it or mentally is taking advantage of the woman. I will jump right in there. And, if I think
Oh,
she's
yeah.
helpless, especially.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially late night when it happens a lot late night on the trains because people tend to have, they're drunk, and that's when relationship problems come out. And then you see a guy. I mean, there's times I've seen like it's disturbing what you see on the train sometimes.
It is. One time in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, I saw a lady taking a bunch of handicapped children, differently abled children, on the bus, and she's looking at her phone. They're doing helter skelter all over the bus. Every time the bus would take off or stop, they'd go flying. She was oblivious. So, I was like, exactly what do you think you're doing that's beneficial to this group of people here? And she was so mad at me, but holy crap balls, get another job.
I know, you're like, you have to pay attention. That's so crazy. The other day I was on the train or on the subway, and I was walking up the stairs, and there was a mother and child, and the mother was on her phone, and then their 3-year-old was also on their iPad, and they were both walking up the stairs. And I was like, ugh, learned behavior. And now they're slowing everyone down. I'm like, it's so insane that both of y'all are looking at your devices right now as we're trying to walk up the stairs.
Of all the things. Oh my gosh. So let's go back to your childhood. How early in your this is what I want to ask you if I met you at a coffee shop. Where in your childhood did you first figure out you were funny?
I don't know. I remember making a conscious thing in my mind of like, when you realize you're not the cute one that all the teachers adore, of like, you don't have the ringlets, you're not like the one that, yeah, like everyone fawns over. Like there were certain girls in my grade that I was like, wow, they sure get a lot of attention. And I just was like, I guess I'll just be the funny one. And I loved stand up. It was always in our household. My dad would always rent specials. And then when I formed memories, HBO was like the big thing, and they always had specials, and we watched them together. And I just thought it was fascinating. So I just remember like repeating Robert Klein jokes and Eddie Murphy stuff at like as young as first grade, and my friends really thinking that it was funny. And I felt like it's so weird to say that I had good timing, but I was only mimicking what I had heard. And so I liked that feeling. And then I think from then on, it switched my mindset that everything I looked at or observed, I think I would always try to make it into a bit.
Wow.
But I remember my first bit as a kid was my parents had a family friend over, and I don't know why, but we started talking about Playboy, and I was really young, and I said I was into scratch and sniff stickers as well, and I was like, I feel like Playboy should have scratch and sniff stickers. And my parents thought it was so funny and perverted for a kid to say something like that, and it really killed at the lunch table.
I love that. I love that. When people put their food on Facebook, and I gag at some of it, food doesn't
Yeah.
look good in a picture. It's
No.
brown and I like sometimes would you stop with the pictures, and if you ever put a scratch and sniffs, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to smell onions.
You think it looks so good. Gag. It's enough to gag.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh, scratch and sniff. That cracked me up because I've used that, with regard to people's Facebook food posts.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting here having a wonderful meal. My husband cooked this for me. I was like, don't eat it. Don't eat it. Like it keeps me from eating too much when people put their pictures up.
Oh yeah, it's
Ugh.
gross. Well, that's why they they cheat when you take photos of food for commercials. They use Crisco for ice cream.
There's a guy in San Francisco that developed a company with fake food. So you could, if you were doing shooting a movie and you needed spaghetti, he had concocted things that looked like spaghetti, and it looked much better than spaghetti looks. That's what people should put on their Facebook.
Yeah, we should just like photo fake food because yeah, food doesn't really it's not very photogenic. Either is the moon. I can never get a good shot of the moon on my camera.
No, that's a tough one. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. Especially when it's like here in Vegas, you go to take a picture. The moon is always next to the stratosphere for some reason. Like, how are you going to trump the
I
stratosphere?
know.
So, you grew up and you were funny. If, then that explains where it came from. So, did people say at some point as you were growing up, you should go try stand up, or did you do that on your own? It sounds like you came to that on your own.
Yeah, I never really I mean, I've had people like for in middle school, whatever it's called, superlatives, like I got voted most humorous. So I knew that people thought I was funny, but no one really said you should do stand up. That was something that I started writing jokes in high school, like my sophomore year. And then it wasn't until I just turned 21 that I started doing stand up. So there was a big time difference there. It was just something that I wanted to do. And I thought that, well, I always wanted to be in the art, like entertainment. Like I wanted to be, at first I thought maybe like a musician or in a band, but I realized I wasn't good in that department. And then I was in Austin and I saw an ad in the back of the local paper, and it was for the HBO Aspen Comedy Festival. And I was aware of that because of HBO. So I knew that was a legit festival. And it just said, "Do you think you're funny?" And then I didn't know that I got there, I stood in line, and then within the first few comics auditioning, I dawned on me. I was like, oh, these people are polished. I am not. Like that was my first time going up, and I definitely was like, oh, I know what's going on here. These guys have been doing these jokes for a while, and I'm about to go up with jokes I've never tried before. And it was probably maybe 200 people, maybe more. And it was an open call of 2 minutes each or something, maybe a minute. And I went up, and it wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst that I saw that day. So I felt decent. And then during break or afterwards, before they announced who were going to advance, I was sitting outside, and then a bunch of Houston comics approached and were like, asked me where I was from, and I told them I was from Houston, and they told me about the Houston Laugh Stop. And then that Monday I changed my courses to where I could have Monday nights off, and then I just started doing the open mics from then on out.
So that was the first time you went on stage, was at that?
Yeah, I wouldn't
contest?
recommend that now, but I had no idea, and I hope no one remembered really. And then then I started right away. I found an open mic at the Houston Laugh Stop, and then I showed up there. They did a drawing every Monday, and then I met all my friends there, and I did that for close to almost 10 years in Houston.
Wow. So who are some people that have helped you along with your career? Or that you want to give a shout out to, or?
I don't know. I mean, I did it all wrong in Houston. First of all, like I drank so much when I was there. I only went up once a week, and then occasionally I would do the showcase show once a month, and it was called Brassy Broads, and it was all the females. And then it never dawned on me to form relationships with the headliners that came through, but I had worked with few, like I always worked with Mitch Fatel, and he was always really nice. And then a few times, I remember Todd Barry was really nice. He's saying that I should move up to New York. And then, so I did about 10 years later. And then, yeah, there were a few, like Zach Galifianakis was really nice.
Wow.
And Arj Barker was really nice. Yeah, I remember those comics were like, yeah, you should move to New York or LA. And then I tried LA, and then I didn't like it. And then I moved back to Texas, and then still did stand up there for years. And then I decided to move to New York, and then I stayed.
What was New York like when you first got there? And how is it compared to now?
Well, it's like you said, like you come to New York, you think you're the shit because you're the big, we're the big fish in the small pond in Houston. I had a little bit of a TV credit, and I just thought that was enough, and it's not. You have to work hard. And it took me a while to realize I had to go. I was so used to being in the Houston scene of just going up once a week and thinking that was what you needed to do. And then I would hang out all the time. It wasn't until New York I realized no one gives a shit about your credits. And it's all about establishing yourself in the scene here in New York. And so it took me about a year or so to really figure it out in New York. And that's when I started hitting all the mics that I could possibly do, hang out at shows, and then organically make friends. I mean, I'm not saying make friends because of what credits they have, but you just naturally just find your crew. And then generally those people also end up moving along, and you move with them. And then I don't know, like a lot of times people are like, how did you get into the clubs? And you're just like, I have no idea. It just happened. But I think one of the moments that changed for me is the doing Caroline's March Madness. Because, and I tell a lot of comics this that just moved to the city or something, because what was the first round is 64 comics are in the first round. So it's 64 comics that book shows, and they see you, and then they see you. I went to the final four that year. And so they see that you're consistently good each week and that you can hold your own. And I think from there, I started getting booked a lot more on comic shows. And then for some reason, I started getting into like the independent shows at the clubs. And then from there, it seemed to have opened the doors where I could send in a veil. Nice. And that's where things picked up. And so I always tell comics to like do those competition shows. I know it hurts your soul sometimes, especially if you get annihilated, but a lot of comics are just seeing you or meeting you for the first time. Yeah. The other one too, I say, is always book your own show, because it's a great way to meet a lot of comics. And then it's not like I never traded spots, but you start meeting a lot more comics and making friends and like seeing people that you really like, and then they see you like they wouldn't normally get to see you, but because you have them on your show, they get to see you perform stand-up, because all the work that you get, I think, in this business is from other comics.
Absolutely. And being nice to people and not jumping down their throat if they're having a bad day, being nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I always say and showing up on time and never being difficult. Yeah, I think punctuality, not canceling last minute. I think those are all like, people rather work with you. They might not even think that you're funny, but they like who you are. And that if you do your job consistently, they'll book you.
Yeah, because nobody's funny every single time. It's impossible.
No, it is. It is. It's, that was like one of the things when I did America's Got Talent. They were like, what's one of your worst shows? And I'm like, I think they're all bad. Like because when you do it so often, you'll have a lot of that are good, but there's so many that are bad, and you just accept it. Especially in New York, there were a lot of shows that I did that you're like, this is awful.
Yeah. I have tapes, and I'm like, I can't stand to watch myself. First of all, I'm really more about how many times were these pity laughs?
Yeah.
No.
But it's those shows that you do really bad at or the ones that stink. I always thought those were the ones that were very great, made me better. Like I remember that comedy club LOL? I think it's still around. And
Yeah.
it was never an ideal situation. Like the audience would have to be barked in, being told that like comics that would never do stand up, like Tina Fey might be there, where you're like, she doesn't even do stand up. Like, why would you think that she's at a Times Square club on the like to get to an elevator on the fourth floor? And then so the crowd's already like hates you. They paid a lot of money for the drinks. So you're just bombing every night in front of these people. And that you realize it's not personal. It's not like they don't like you. So once you stop taking it personally, I feel like you end up not caring when you're on stage, and then you end up being more fun, and then you realize there's no fear in it. And I think those are the shows that I got good at.
Me too.
Yeah.
I love it when you get up there and they're not paying attention and you have to be outrageous to get them to even pay attention, you know?
Yeah.
And
And
and like
it got me better with like hecklers or dealing with crowds. Like it made me, you realize sometimes you're like, oh, they're not listening to anything that I say. And so from that point, if you're doing 5 minutes of material and then you realize your jokes are not hitting, and those are the ones that are consistently good, you're like, oh, I have to go into the crowd, and then you engage with them. And sometimes they just want to be engaged with. I mean, it's a little frustrating if you're trying to work on a set, but sometimes you have to bend with the crowd a little bit. You can't
yes,
just tell your jokes. You have to have a connection.
yeah. We had a girl, I went to this show down in Boulder City like a month ago, and nobody was wearing a mask. And I went
Yeah.
anyway. And the week before, a girl went up for the second time, and her name was Daisy, and she was wearing Daisy Dukes, and nobody said anything about it. Nobody made that connection. So I started my set, and she wasn't paying attention. So she had like she was a big ringleader in the group anyway. So I started making fun of her being Daisy with the Daisy Dukes, trying to get her people to listen to me, and it worked.
Yeah. I feel like anytime you say someone's name, they'll perk up a little bit.
When I first said her name, she wasn't paying attention. I go, she's not even paying attention. And she said out loud, she goes, I would if you'd say something funny. I'm like,
Nice.
oh crap. But by the end of the set, I got her laughing and she hugged me after. So, but at first I
Yeah.
was like, oh God, this is not going to be good.
I know, but that have being, sometimes I think with experience, even when your first few jokes don't land, if that's happened before, if you're just comfortable with yourself, you'll usually get them on your side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that, in your comedy career, what is something you learned that you never thought was going to be part and parcel to doing stand up, but you learned it? And it was painful maybe or difficult, but you never bargained for this when you got into comedy, but here you are, you made it through it.
Um, I guess it's like the acceptance that you're you're going to eat it sometimes, and that it does feel like you're only as good as your last set, but like you always have the next day to like change it. Like it's not permanent, whatever those feelings are that you're dealing with in stand up. It's so weird. Like you can feel like you're on top of the world in comedy, and then you have this set, and it like, I don't know. It it knocks your knees out from behind you a little bit, but I think it's good. It keeps you grounded, and it makes you realize that you got to work on things, and that you're not impervious to all this. And I think it's good to have those challenges because I think it makes you a better comic. I do think that if you feel like you're already good, then I don't know. I feel like you're never going to grow as a stand up. I think having a little self-hatred is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So um, there's a this thing drives me nuts. I just want to ask it. Everybody throws out this term and it drives me crazy that you hear it being said, and very few people have been able to put meat on it. And so I want to ask you, you're a veteran, and I'm sure you've heard people say you just need to know how to read a room. And nobody ever uses it in a positive way, like, wow, you really know how to read a room. But like if you bomb or you're having trouble getting to the next level, people will say, well, you just need to know how to learn how to read a room. Like, what is learning? Once you start off and your jokes don't land, you switch material. But if you walk in cold to a comedy room, is there something kind of Wizard of Oz, something I'm missing, how to read a room before you go up, other than listening to how the last guy's set went before you? How do you read a room? Like somebody's wearing an old-fashioned sweater, so you tell. It seems like it's a whole secret society that nobody wants to explain, but you need to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's reading a room is kind of maybe feels like an intuitive feeling. But sometimes I can gauge how I'm going to do by the audience. Like I get really worried if I have a crowd that's either majority men or majority women. And I think I like a crowd that's close to 50-50. I think because I feel like when you deal with one certain demographic, if you're not their cup of tea, which is fine, then it's hard to get them on your side. I still don't I still to this day, and I think a lot of comics are like this, they still try to figure out the combination of like how to get a group of people to like you. But I think the thing is to not care if they like you or not. But I mean, sometimes you'll walk into a room and you definitely are like, what happened? Something happened here. Something blew up. Somebody said something that didn't hit or made you guys very upset, and now it's different. Because that happens a lot. Sometimes you're running from spot to spot, and then you are literally running onto stage, and you can sense that like the energy change. Maybe you went up after a comic that has a different energy level that you do, and it feels like the room was blown apart, and now you have to like bring it back down to your level. And I think that's just sticking to your ground, like just still keep to who you are a little bit. Those are moments that I feel like you have to figure out reading the room. Again, like it's another one, like you feel like the room may be distracted, and so maybe you have to call out the elephant in the room. Sometimes that feels like throwing somebody under the bus, but I don't care. I'll do it if it feels like it gets them all on my side. Because sometimes there's just one person that's ruining the whole show.
Yeah.
But then you don't want to give them attention. And so that's the thing that's like good to watch the comics before you. You're like, I'll notice. I've done shows where like I've done it at the Soho Club, and that's a predominantly very wealthy young crowd. And then I'll notice comics that make jokes about how rich they are, and they probably won't like them as a comic. And I think that making people feel guilty about their socioeconomic class, poor or rich, makes people feel uncomfortable. So I'll watch that and just make note that I won't mention that. And I feel like then I'll have a better set than the other comics did, because I realize they don't like it when you mention their economic background.
You put some meat on it that nobody else has been able to do before you.
Oh, well, I'm glad that I was able to do it, because it is a hard question, and I totally understand, like, it's still hard. I think a lot of even veterans still try to figure out, there's still nights that you're like, wow, what happened? I'm usually pretty good at having wrenches thrown at me, and that one was quite different than I'm used to. And it's still a learning lesson.
Sometimes when you go and do your comedy, you feel like you went bowling and blindfolded. It's like, did I get a strike? I don't know. Was that a spare? How did I do it? I don't know. What lane am I at anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because sometimes you'll watch like Dave Attell, and
Yes.
he is so good, no matter how bad the room is, to get them on board, no matter how rowdy. And you'll think he's having a good time, and then he'll get off stage and he'll go, I hated them. And then you're like, that's so crazy, because it looks like you were having really a great time up there. And you're so good at like dealing with whatever gets thrown at you.
I've heard he's so amazing, and I met him once, but I've never ever watched his comedy. I don't really learn from watching people's videos. I learn from watching them live.
Yeah.
I want to see the audience and then what they do, because that guy over, I can't. It's like watching NASCAR. You can't see it when they're on the back of the track, like half the time.
You want to see the wheels turning and what's happening in that moment, because we are dealing with the thing that's happening at that moment.
Exactly. So have you shared the stage with David Tell?
I mean, I've gone on, like, I'll be on showcase shows with him, but I've never been on stage with him. But I've worked with him. He used to come into Houston a lot when the Houston Laugh Stop, and so he was always a local favorite. Yeah. Like, when David Tell was in town, all the comics came out.
He has a lot of respect from the people in comedy. Yeah.
Well, he's just one of the best.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He's way up there. He's the top.
Yeah.
You got to admit, he's at the top of it. And I don't even know what he does, but I mean, his reputation precedes him. And okay, so I'll tell you the story how I met him. I was hanging out at the olive tree to meet people at your caliber. I'm not going to lie, because I've only been doing this 6 years, and then I started with a brain injury, and the last 6 months, I don't have to look at notes. So,
it's hard.
Yeah. And so I'm up there and I'm like, I want to see who I can meet. And he was there. And somebody told me that he knows my comedy coach, Gladys Simon. So I went up to him and I said, I'm a Gladys Simon graduate too. She's my coach. And he goes, oh, I'm not getting him on board, And I said, can I get a picture with you? And he goes, sure. And I go, okay, so look into the camera and act like you really want to be with me. You know what I mean? Click. And the minute he got that cheese-eating grin on his face, I clicked it. And everybody's like, how did you get David Tell to smile? And that's how. The next day I was at a diner up by Stand Up New York. I was just having coffee. And in walks David Tell the next day after I do this thing with the camera. And I said, David Tell, are you following me? And he thought, he went outside. He like needed to regroup. Like, I can't believe she's here. I just saw her yesterday. Wasn't that enough? He comes back in and he goes, anything on the menu you can have and I'll pay for it.
Oh, yeah, he's really nice, but he definitely has a wall up a lot of the time. So when you see it come down, it's nice.
Yes. That was nice. Nice that I got that special smile out of him.
Yeah.
But so who is somebody that you looked up to that you got to meet or be around or do comedy with that you still are shaking? Like, would it be James Corden or other comics besides? Like, who's somebody that, oh, wow, I can't believe that I got to?
Well, I always think it's like cool just to be when you're at the cellar. Like, I like just, when you're at the table and you're like, wow, I'm hanging out with some of the people that when I first started, like, I admired. Like, I love Colin Quinn, and it's just like amazing to be like, oh, I know him, and I just think his specials are the greatest, and they're so smart. And Gary Goldman, you're like, he's one of my favorite comedy writers, and you're just like, wow, I'm at a picnic with Gary Goldman right now. Like, that's pretty fucking cool. And like, you get so excited for all these people that are doing like all these specials. And I mean, I don't know Dave Chappelle, but I really love it when people like him or Chris Rock stop by the cellar and then they do a spot and the audience has no idea at like 1 a.m. they're about to see one of the best comics go up on stage. And it's one of my favorite things to see a crowd just lose their shit because they had no idea they paid money for a ticket just to see a New York's on the comics on the lineup, and some of them they don't know, and then they get to see like the best guy work out new material, and you're just like, oh, it's so cool that I'm part of this scene. Like, it's amazing.
Yes. Well, I personally think so much of your comedy career. I'm so thrilled to get to talk to you and have you open up your life, you know, and I'm sad that I need to get off of Zoom and but you've been so gracious and so nice to me, and thank you for working with me to be on here. And I would love you to come back on anytime you have any special you want to promote or shows. Anytime you want to come on for 5 and plug something, would you use me in that way?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd like to plug my album if anybody wants.
Yes.
My album is Voluptuous Boy, and you can stream it on Pandora and Spotify for free, or you can download it off of iTunes.
Voluptuous Boy.
Yeah.
And it's on iTunes, Spotify,
Pandora, Amazon, Google Play, anywhere that you can stream music and comedy, you'll find it there.
I'd love to help plug that. And I have all your links, so I'll put them on the post.
Yeah.
I always do a wrap up after the video, and then in about 2 to 3 days, my tech person is going to come out with a sitcom version of this video. So if you could share that as well.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Sarah Tollemache.
Thank you, Linda.
I love you a lot. You're a great person. Thanks for being so kind.
Oh, definitely. This has been really fun.
Thank you. Have a great day, and I hope your career just keeps on going up and up and up.
Oh, thank you.
You
yeah,
probably,
and hopefully I'll be in hopefully I'll be in Vegas soon when the pandemic kind of chills out.
Tell me when you're here. I'll take you to Starbucks and we'll laugh over coffee.
That sounds great.
We'll do a Seinfeld thing.
Yeah.
Except no cars.
No cars.
Yeah, just comedian with coffee.
Just coffee.
See you later.
Yeah. All right. Bye, Linda.
Bye, Sarah.
Everybody's